And we're going to get started with Kyle Davis talking about in-game economies.
Morning, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming out this early. This is a really big, exciting room. Okay, so my name is Kyle. I'm going to be talking about the in-game economies that we have in Team Fortress and in Dota, and also on Steam. There's probably going to be a lot of information in this talk, and it's going to go by pretty fast. We fit in as much as we could, so there isn't going to be room for a Q&A immediately after this talk, but the questions are really valuable, and the conversations that come out of those questions are really valuable. So we're doing a whole Q&A follow-up session afterwards at 2 this afternoon that I'll remind you about again at the end of the talk. Okay, so really, this is a talk about how to make your product better, focusing on using things like economic systems and microtransactions as tools that you can use to improve the product. It's our belief, and we have a lot of data to back up this belief, that products that use microtransactions or economic systems as tools for other things, like maximizing revenue extraction from unhappy users, will lose in the marketplace against products that use these tools to actually improve the customer experience and make the product better. This talk is going to be broken into 2 parts. First, we're going to go over some of the basic lessons that we've learned in the last couple of years working with our economies. You can think of these as important things that we've learned or tools that we use internally when we're coming up with new systems or evaluating systems. Or you can think of these as recommendations that we're comfortable making to a large group of people like this. The second part of the talk is going to focus on individual case studies where we look at specific features, how users interacted with those features, the data we collected, how well they map onto our recommendations, and what we learned. So to jump right into it, the first recommendation that we have, and maybe the most important one, is focus on systems and ideas that generate persistent value for customers. Really, this is one of the core philosophies for Valve in general. Our interest is in having long-term customers that are really happy. So anything that comes at a cost of customer happiness is something that we, at all costs, would like to avoid. So to be really concrete, we would rather not have someone become a customer of ours than become a customer and be unhappy about that decision. Later on, we figure we can find a way to provide a service or offer something that will make them into a happy customer. And we'd much rather wait until we can do that, rather than have them as a customer in the short term and then lose them because they regret their purchases. Avoiding regret is actually something that we focus a lot on. We have something internally that we call the regret test. When we're coming up with a new system, we sit down people internally who are working on it, and we have them interact with it, and we find out a day later, a week later, are they still happy with their interactions? When we ship systems to the public space, we continue to collect data and look at the people who interact with the system and find out, do they continue interacting with it? Are they happy with their interactions? There are a bunch of tools that we have to avoid customer regret in this space. We communicate really clearly around what a customer will be purchasing. We do a bunch of work to maintain that value after a customer has purchased through systems like trade that we'll talk more about later. A bunch of really pervasive microtransaction systems in the gaming industry right now violate this. So things like putting artificial barriers into your game and then charging users to remove them when it's clear that those exist only to generate revenue for you and provide no service to the customer. Using things like virtual currencies to obfuscate pricing or trap user value inside the system. All of these things, they lead to regret, and regret leads to effectively training your customers to stop buying things from you, which is incredibly damaging long term. So to summarize this in one sentence, we view any system that generates revenue at a cost of customer happiness as a broken system that we need to fix. So the second recommendation we have is to focus on systems that generate positive externalities. It's probably easiest to describe positive externalities by describing the opposite, negative externalities. So anytime you've ever been playing a game and you found yourself on a server with someone else and your experience was worsened, you were having less fun, enjoying the game less because they had spent money, that was an example of a system that generated negative externalities. In fact, when we think of the common customer complaints against pay-to-win games, the problem isn't fundamentally that users can pay for power. The problem is that everyone except the guy who actually paid, everyone else's experience gets worsened when somebody does this. So we like to focus on the opposite. What are systems that we can come up with where You, as a customer, are happy when the customers that you're playing with decide to invest in this. What are systems where you want other people or yourself to spend money because they improve the quality of the game for everyone? This isn't just an abstract philosophical concept. This is a tool that we can use both to evaluate existing designs for systems that we're looking at, but also that we can use as a starting point to come up with entirely new system designs. And we'll see a couple examples of those in the case studies. So if we were giving this presentation to ourselves a couple years ago, this probably would have been the most surprising of the recommendations. Trade is an incredibly valuable system. Trade makes every item that is tradable more valuable. It makes every system that interacts with trade more valuable. It makes every user that interacts with trade more valuable to every other user. Fundamentally, trade is a system by which valuation differences between customers can become a positive thing for everyone involved. Trade is a system by which two customers can interact with each other and both improve each other's experience. And this interacts with other systems in really, really surprising ways. And so when we get to the case studies, we'll be looking at some of those as well. Our fourth recommendation is to, when possible, distribute value randomly. Many games right now use systems where we call them static distribution systems. So if you play the game for an hour, you'll earn 100 experience points or 100 gold pieces. And you can then choose from a preset selection of rewards that you want to spend it on. And we don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with that kind of system. But random distribution gives you a lot more tools, and you can use these tools to increase customer engagement or interact with other systems in really positive ways. As a concrete example, if you have a static distribution system and you let users pick from one of 3 rewards, you're really limited in what you as a game designer can offer in terms of value distribution for those 3 rewards or power distribution. But if you're distributing item content randomly, you can have one item that's 10,000 times, 100,000 times more valuable than another item. And this is part of the system, and that's okay. This combines with trade in a bunch of really positive ways that are so interesting, I'm going to do a whole slide on just that later. So our last primary recommendation is to come up with systems that let users generate value for each other. Fundamentally, this is about enlisting the internet to fight to improve your product. There are millions of people out there that are interested in the games that we're all making. And some of them are amazingly good at art or good at design or creative in some space that we haven't even fully explored yet. If you have millions of people that are all fighting to improve your product is going to get better and grow in really interesting ways that it isn't capable of doing if it's only being worked on by the 20 or the 200 people inside the office. Fundamentally, if you don't allow your customers to improve your product, they're going to go improve someone else's product. So if you can have them on your side, it's you benefit, effectively. There's a lot of different forms that value generation can take. Some of these are really concrete. We have a bunch of them listed up here. So users can produce content like mesh content for the games. They can produce levels. They can do community organization work where they write tutorials or they organize groups of like-minded people. This can be more abstract, where users can give items to each other or help out new players. These are all forms of value generation. And a critical part of this is that users who generate value need to be rewarded in some way for the value that they're generating. And wherever possible, we mean that concretely as they get financially rewarded in proportion to the value that they're generating. So this is the end of our recommendations. The more interesting stuff is when we actually see these being applied, but just to go over them again really quickly. Focus on persistent customer value. Whatever you're asking users to buy is something that they will be happy that they purchased and continue being happy that they made that purchase down the road. Focus on systems that create positive externalities so that everyone is happier when anyone chooses to spend money. Make everything tradable, and there's a bunch of good stuff coming on that. Distribute value randomly because it gives you a lot more tools to generate player engagement and expand other systems. And let users generate value for each other, and by doing so, improve the quality of your product. So let's look at some case studies. Specifically, as we go through these, we're going to be jumping around a lot because we have years of data to cover, and we're trying to pick out really, really interesting ones that make compelling points. So I apologize in advance for some of the rougher transitions. So we're looking for what happens when we follow our recommendations? What happens when we take some of these recommendations that we thought were globally applicable when we learned them in Team Fortress and apply them to drastically different games? What's the actual concrete data? How many users, what percentage of users are interacting with these systems? So we're going to start with something really simple and really, really positive. We have a system in Team Fortress that we call gifting, very creatively, maybe. So the initial design discussion for gifting was a couple guys sitting in a room asking the question, if I'm a Team Fortress player, what's something that you can buy that I start celebrating when you make that purchase? So it's a really simple system. You can go to the store, you buy a big bundle of gifts. It's a one-time consumable. You go onto a server, you use this consumable, and everyone you're playing with on the server gets a free item from you. So you get no direct value from this, but you get social recognition. You're generating happiness in a bunch of other customers. We were curious, will players be interested in this? Will it be a tiny portion of players? Will people do this more than once? Will it be focused around events? So the results of this are up here. This is data from last week. So at this point in TF, we have a little over 1 million accounts have ever given out at least one gift. And a little under 2 million accounts have ever received a gift. And this is great for us. Like, this is really exciting because it means that not only do we have 1 million customers who think this is a good use of their money, but it means that we have almost another 1 million customers who didn't spend money directly, whose experience is still being improved by the people who did. If you sort the 1,000 or so items that we've ever sold in the in-game TF store by lifetime revenue generation, the bundle of gifts that I'm describing is the 10th highest lifetime earner. So put together, we have millions of accounts that are participating in this, that are opting in financially and saying this is something they want to do. We have millions more accounts who aren't directly opting in financially, but who are benefiting because other people have. And we're making millions and millions of dollars off this system. Like, this is what a successful system looks like for us. When I was pulling this data, there were a couple other fun facts. The current #1 user in terms of gifts distributed in TF has individually handed out almost 12,500 presents. And we have more than 140 accounts who have handed out more than 1,000 each. So these are people, this is a system they like. So the takeaway from this slide is not put gifts into your game. The takeaway from this slide is we got here entirely by sitting down and saying, what's a system that can generate positive externalities? And then implementing a version to see what happened. OK, so now we're going to look at something that went a little less well when we launched it. When we launched the store for Team Fortress, we shipped it with a system that we called crates and keys. So crates are items that drop for free to every player that plays the game. Every crate contains a specific set of content. So you can see, for example, this crate contains one of these weapons or one of these hats, or a more special, more rare item. If you're interested in opening a crate, you can go to the store or trade another user for a single-use key. You use the key disappears, the crate disappears, and you get one of the items that come out of it. So our goal for this system was to let players opt in financially, if they were interested, to a random distribution system, to find out, are players interested in opting in financially to random distribution systems, or are they more interested in buying specific items, or are they more interested in something else? This was the launch of the store, so we were trying to cover really broad strokes. So this generated more negative feedback than any other feature when we launched the store. There were a bunch of perception problems where the community ascribed intentions to our actions. For example, they thought that we were attempting to capitalize on poor player judgment or poor understanding of statistics, or that we were trying to, in the short term, maximize the revenue extraction from every individual user as we burned them out on this system. And this is exactly opposite to what I was talking about a couple minutes ago for real player value, happy customers, avoiding regret. So clearly, we had a lot of work to do with this system. So we started trying to address customer complaints and improve the system so that it was a reasonable value proposition for these users. So one of the first things we did was we realized that some of the initial crates contained content such that you could go to the store and spend $2.50 and buy a key, use a key on a crate, and have the item that you would get randomly be an item that you could have bought in the store for 50 cents. And in hindsight, this was just a huge oversight on our part. There was no way as a customer to look at that transaction besides, I just lost $2 of actual value. So we established a really clear rule that any item that comes out of a crate that you could buy in the store has to, at a bare minimum, cost more than the value of the key. And oftentimes they cost 10 times or 15 times more than the value of the key. The goal was not to put users in a position where they were gambling. It was to put them in a position where they had random chances. And there's a fundamental difference there. We did a bunch of research around what specifically about the system users liked or didn't like. So we experimented with different types of crates. Crates that were available to all users, crates that were available over a long time period or a short time period, crates that contained 5 items versus crates that contained 50 items. One of the most important things I think we did was we looked for systems that could add value to every item that came out of a crate. So there's one example of that listed up here where weapons that come out of crates have the same gameplay as weapons that you would buy in the store or find for free playing the game, but they track gameplay statistics for the current owner of that weapon. So this particular guy, he has a scattergun that he's killed almost 1,000 people with. He's interested in tracking the number of heavy weapons players he's killed and the number of buildings he's destroyed. And so that's a service that these crate weapons provide. So as a result of all of this, these and many, many other changes that we've made to the crate system over the last several years, participation is higher, more players are opening crates. The players that are opening crates choose to open more of them over a longer time period. Some of the crates themselves, not the actual items that come out, but just the crate itself, the opportunity to play the random distribution game, sell for $20, $40, $60, $80 between users. There's increased engagement from our customers where forum threads will pop up saying, what do you want to see in the next crate? What new stats do you want to see them tracking? What new hats do you want to see in the next instance? One of the best indicators is probably that when we, for reasons not worth going into here, don't ship crates fast enough, our users send us angry emails saying they're tired of the existing crate content, they want us to ship more new crates. So all of this to us seems like an indication that both qualitatively and quantitatively, the system is better than it's ever been. And this doesn't mean that we're done, that we're going to stop iterating at this point. But it does mean that we're making improvements and we're moving in the right direction. So I told you I would talk about some of the interesting ways that trade interacted with these systems. This slide is the only time in this entire presentation I'm going to talk about conversion rate. And my hope is that by the end of this slide, you will join us in thinking that conversion rate is actually not that useful a thing to talk about. And in fact, focusing on it can be more damaging than it is useful. So we pulled data from Team Fortress. We had approximately a 13% conversion rate for users buying keys directly. So 13 out of every 100 players, at the point that we collected this data, had gone to the store and bought a key directly. 15% of players had used a key to open a crate. So this means that at bare minimum, 2% of our player base doesn't buy keys, but trades for keys so that they can play the crate minigame on their own. And there could be a lot of reasons for this. The 87% of people who aren't buying, they could be people without access to credit cards or without living in parts of the world where we have poor payment services. Or they could just not be interested in spending money directly in this way. But the most interesting number is that 75% of our player base contains, when they log in, at least one of these items that only comes out of a crate. So 3 out of every 4 people are generating demand and consuming the content that comes out of this. So what we see all the time is that you as a user will generate demand. You will trade value for someone that eventually down the road results in a purchase or another trade, and everyone along this chain is happier for it. So again, to be really concrete, this is a way by which we're effectively monetizing free players. You as a free player generate demand, and you're willing to trade value for someone that makes a purchase in the store and generates revenue for us. And especially everyone along that chain who's part of those transactions is happier as a result of completing those transactions. So the statistics counting weapons that I was just talking about are a more specific example. The general case is that trade combines with random distribution systems in a way that's just incredibly positive for effectively everyone who plays the game, and also you as the developer of the game. So the general case of this is that you're in some way distributing items randomly across your player base. So you may be granted an item through some system that's not very valuable to you, but that's extremely high value to someone else. And that someone else will go out and purchase or trade or in some way generate value so that they can trade to you for the item that they value highly. Like I mentioned, we have some random drops in Team Fortress that sell for $80 or $100 between users. Dota has items that go into the thousands. But this isn't us placing valuations on these items. These are users who say, you've got something that I'm really interested in. I'm going to go buy $1,000 worth of value and trade it to you. And at the end, both of these users are happier for that transaction having taken place. And again, this is a way by fundamentally we monetize free players. This is not an accident. This is by design. As more and more time passes, we see more and more blogs popping up and more emails from our players saying, I'm not really sure what happened, but I've been playing Dota for the last week or two, and I made $100 selling these items that I got. This is hugely successful for us. This means that the guy who did the selling is happy, the person who did the purchasing is happy. We're happy because we, somewhere along the way, generated $100 worth of value. So this is a system that everyone wins, basically. So let's look at a more concrete way that users can generate value for each other. So I'm going to go over community-generated content really quickly in this talk. This is an incredibly interesting topic to us, and in fact, the entire talk after mine is going to be Tom Bowie up here going into a lot more detail on this. But for purposes of this talk, we're going to focus on community-generated content, user-generated content, as a concrete way that users can add value to your game and to other users who are playing. So at this point, more than 90%, significantly more than 90% of the item content in Team Fortress and Dota comes from the community. So this is the actual production work, where they make the mesh content, they make the art content. This includes the marketing work, where they will make animated videos to advertise their new item set, or contract 2D artists to do really, really incredibly amazing art to get the community excited about their sets so that they can generate more sales. The community also does the evaluation on what they want to see in the game. So through tools like the workshop, you as a player can vote and say, I want to see this content in my game, or I don't want to see this content in my game. If the content is positively received by the community, it goes into the in-game store, and the contributors who made that content get a portion of all of the revenue derived from direct item sales. So one of the best ways that we can look at how much value these guys are actually generating for us and for the community is by looking at that portion of direct item sales that they're taking home. So when we launched the TF store in 2010, we had about 100 items in the store coming from about 60 different contributor accounts. And we paid out about $500,000 by the end of the year. So last year in total, we had about 2,500 items, 660 accounts, and the total community contributor take-home was a little over $10 million. And this is incredibly exciting for us. This isn't us saying, we think you made a really interesting courier in Dota, we're going to buy it for $5,000. This is the community's evaluation of what this content is worth. These guys have very clearly generated millions and millions of dollars of value for our games and for the other people in the community, and they get to take home millions of dollars because that's the value that they generated. When I was putting together this slide, I also ran the numbers. The total community contributor take-home for the first week of this year was about $400,000. And so, I hope it comes across, but this is just incredibly exciting for us. We have the community producing content, the community evaluating that content, and the people in the community being rewarded in proportion to the value that they're generating as determined by the people they're selling it to. So the last slide, I'm going to talk about community content. I want to make a special mention. We did something for the first time last year in TF where, as time has gone on, the community has grown and focused on building more and more different types of content. And so last year, for the first time, they built an entire Team Fortress update. So they built the marketing materials for it. They built the animated short that described it. They made the comic. They did the writing and the art for it. They had 2D artists doing interesting 2D sketches in different styles of the characters wearing these new items to get people excited. And then all of these people collected revenue based on their work. So this is the first time in TF history we have comic book artists generating revenue by generating excitement and value for the TF community. The game has grown since then, but at the time we shipped this update, this was the single highest grossing day in TF's history. Okay, so we're going to transition now. We've been talking a little bit about trade, and trade is a system by which fundamentally value is added by increasing the number of players who are capable of consuming a particular piece of content. So we had a lot of success there, and we asked ourselves, what are other ways that we can increase visibility, so increase the potential number of consumers of a particular piece of content, and also demand. So a lot of this takes the form of features on Steam. If you have an item inside your TF backpack or inside your Dota backpack, you can link to it from your web page. You can link to it in Steam chat. You can trade items across games. So the hat that you really like in TF, you can trade for the sword that you really like in Dota. We've done things like implement the Steam Marketplace, which allows users to, in a reliable and secure way, trade any in-game items for Steam Wallet funds. We have a whole lot more ideas. The important thing for this isn't that we wrote these features for Team Fortress or for Dota, but that these are Steam-level features. We think fundamentally the value of every item in the economy increases as more partner games and more items join the economy. So if your game joins the economy, Team Fortress items become more valuable because they can be traded for the items in your game. The items in your game become more valuable because they can be traded for Team Fortress items. And there's no fall off. The more participants there are, the more valuable it is for everyone. So if you have any interest in this, please come talk to us. We think it's incredibly valuable for us and you and all of our customers. One concrete example of this increased visibility demonstrating that it works just as well in partner games is when we did the Steam Winter Sale. So as users participated in the most recent Steam Winter Sale, they had the ability to acquire free-to-play items for free-to-play games, including ours and our partner games. So overall, we handed out a couple million items to a ridiculous number of accounts. All of the value they got was free. And overnight, partner games saw huge spikes in interest, just because players had more visibility into these games, and they had vested value in these games that they could trade with other players or get a head start on. Some of these partner games, overnight, their daily revenues went up by 50 or 80%. Okay, now we're going to transition again. We're going to talk about a system that exists in Dota that has no analog in TF, and see how the recommendations that we talked about at the beginning apply here. So we have something that we call leagues in Dota. These work similar to, you can think of it as pay-per-view. A user can go to the store and buy a ticket, and they can consume that ticket, which will give them in-game access to a tournament or a league that they're interested in following. So they can watch the games live from inside the client. They get historical access to all of the games for the lifetime of the account. They can pick a player that they're really interested in and watch those players' mouse movements in real time as they're playing in a game. There's just a bunch of actual concrete value there, both immediately after the purchase, but also in perpetuity. The actual funds that users generate in purchasing these items is split with the league organizers and get used for things like increasing the prize pool or increasing the production budget. So I don't think a lot of people, including us when we did the system, would look at this as a system and say, this is a system that will benefit greatly from implementation of trade. But when we actually ran the numbers, we found that on average, 1 out of every 8 consumers of these league tickets had traded for it and not done the purchase directly. And for some of the bigger, more popular tournaments, that number went as high as 1 out of every 4. So concretely, this means that because these items were tradable, all of these leagues have bigger prize pools, they have bigger production budgets, they have a bigger audience that they can use to communicate with. So again, this is an example of us monetizing free players in a way where the player who did the purchase and the player who consumed the content are both happier for it. We have another system in Dota that we call Battle Boosters. The design for this came from the exact same place as the design for GIFs in Team Fortress. A bunch of guys sat down in a room and asked the question, Dota's a really competitive game. I want something where I'm super excited to see a guy on the other team has decided to invest in this particular thing. What is that thing? What does that look like? So the way battle boosters work is when they are consumed, they increase the rate at which players acquire random drops. But specifically, they increase the rate for you as the consumer, but also everyone you play with in every game. And so what we noticed was that we shipped this system, and overnight, but on a longer tail, over the next couple weeks as well, there was a huge sea change in how players communicated at the starts of rounds in Dota, where if I joined a game and I saw that someone on my team or someone on the enemy team had activated a battle booster, I was excited to be playing with them. And so I would say positive things, and I would stop saying negative things. I would lower the rate at which I said negative things. So since we launched this system, we've done work to clarify the value proposition to players so that they know really clearly, if I spend my money on this, what will it generate for me in terms of value? What will it generate for other users that I'm playing with in terms of value? So again, like gifts, this is a system where we have millions of players are participating, millions more players are benefiting from their participation, and we're making millions of dollars off of it. So this is the last specific case study that I'm going to talk about. It's complicated. It's a really fun everything. So we run a tournament that we call the International. It's so far been a once-a-year Dota 2 tournament. For last year's, we decided to try something new. So again, thinking back to our recommendations, we tried to look for ways that we could hit as many of those as we could. So we came up with this idea of selling a digital interactive program book. So if you think of going to a play and you get a little pamphlet that says, here are the actors in the play and here's the background for it. This would do that sort of thing for the tournament, so you could see the players and the history of the teams and things that you were interested in. But it was also interactive. So you had the ability to make predictions. You could set up your fantasy league. Especially, you could show your predictions after the fact to your friends to prove that you were the most right player in the entire game of Dota. You also had the ability to affect the event, so you could do things like vote on who you wanted to see in the all-star match, which would turn into something in the real world. So there was just a bunch of value that you got just for purchasing this. But there was also a bunch of positive externalities that were generated in a wide variety of interesting ways. So there were stretch goals set up around the total number of purchases for this book. So this had the effect of meaning that if I had purchased a compendium, my purchase became more valuable the more other users purchased one. Mine would become more powerful, more things would unlock as more stretch goals were met. One of the stretch goals was an incredibly valuable battle booster, which meant that even if I wasn't purchasing the compendium directly myself, if I found myself in a game with someone who had made the purchase, I was happier to be playing with them. And in fact, I was happy that everyone had made these purchases, because now there was a really powerful battle booster on behalf of all of these people who had decided that this was where they wanted their money to go. So this was a $10 purchase, of which $2.50 would just be immediately added onto the prize pool, the total prize pool for the tournament. And this meant that even if you weren't playing Dota, you were benefiting as people purchased these books, because the tournament prize pool would grow and become more exciting, and the games would become more exciting. So the end result of this is that we sold just under 500,000 of these books, which meant that the community's excitement, they would rally around wanting to hit the next stretch goal, or wanting to get all of their friends a copy of this book, or wanting to hit a specific prize pool amount. And so the community organized itself into a group that added $1.2 million to the prize pool for the International last year, which meant that they turned that into the single largest prize pool for any esports event in history. This is a brand new item. This is a new space. This doesn't fit into any existing models that we have for microtransactions. This came from sitting down and saying, what are the things that we have found valuable? What are our recommendations? How can we come up with a system that hits as many of them as possible for as many users as possible? But one of the big takeaways, so this is our recommendations again. I sort of snuck a sixth one at the bottom. One of the big things that we learned from doing the compendium is that there are so many ideas out there that don't fit into existing models. This space is still relatively new, and we have a lot of exploring left to do. we have a huge number of ideas for things that we think would be valuable systems to put in the economy. We would like high-skilled Dota players to be able to offer training services inside the client and get paid by their students to improve them. We'd like programmers and game designers and animators and every other type of content producer to be able to make Team Fortress a more interesting game in the same way that modelers can right now. On and on and on and on. Fundamentally, we have a lot of data that backs up the idea that we could be making our customers a lot happier by making improvements in these systems. And in doing so, we could be making a lot more money. So our hope is that one of the things that will happen as a result of this presentation is that you'll join us. You'll run your own experiments. You'll learn about your customers and what they like. And we can all explore this space together a lot more quickly than we could independently. So one thing I haven't really talked about is concretely what sort of success has this resulted in. So the longest running economy we have is Team Fortress. And also some of the Dota numbers are too big to fit on the slides in terms of the numbers of items in the economy and things like that. So we have about 17 million accounts that own at least one item in the game. There's about 500 million items that are active right now. And there have been about 4 billion actions since we started the economy that affect the item in some persistent way. So trading it to another user, doing a permanent customization, something like that. So this is just to give you a sense of the scope. But really, the interesting numbers are that over the last couple years since we launched the store in TF, the player base has continued to grow. So more people are playing TF now than they were 6 months ago. More people were playing 6 months ago than they were 6 months before that. The game just continues to grow and continues to grow. And so this is one of the indications we have that we're making decisions in this space that keep our customers happy to keep coming back. But one of the other really interesting things is that as time has gone on, users are choosing to buy more items than they had before. Users are choosing to spend more money in the game than they had before. And so we were curious when we started seeing this. Is there something fundamentally, is there an intrinsic property of Team Fortress that enables this kind of growth and this kind of economic behavior, or are these general principles? And so we applied the same thinking to Dota, and you saw how some of those examples went, and we had success there. And we've been working with partners recently as we developed more confidence in these recommendations, and they've been seeing the same sort of success that we've been seeing. So really, what's the takeaway from all of this? Fundamentally, we reject the premise that microtransaction systems must come at a cost of user happiness. This is a space where everyone can win. There are no trade-offs to be made here. It's possible to come up with system designs such that your customers are happy to interact with them. Your customers who are producing content make money from their interactions. Your customers who are just playing the game also make money from their interactions with the system. And you, as the developer of the game, also make money off the happiness of your players in a way that's sustainable and beneficial for everyone. So I hope this was useful. If you have any questions, no matter how small or how silly, please email me at robin@valvesoftware.com. More seriously, though, we have the talk immediately after mine is all about user-generated content and is super, super interesting. We're doing a whole Q&A just on economy and economic features at 2 p.m. in the room I totally didn't write down, but I believe it's 611. And then we're doing another Q&A on user-generated content at 4 p.m. So if you can make it to those, that's great. If you see me in the hallway or you just want to send me an email at my actual email address, that also works. I hope this was useful for you guys. I look forward to the conversations, and thanks for your time.